Shou-Lao might be one of the strongest cards that has come out in recent memory. At 5'8", with an on-reveal ability that gives the character you played last before Shou-Lao +3 power for every turn you've played 2 or more cards, this guy goes in every deck that plays 2 or more cards. The biggest thing about this guy to me, though, is that he is an important and powerful piece of his own decks. This is not just a guy that goes in every deck that plays the amount of cards at the right volume to afford him. He's a guy that tells you to change your deck to adapt to him. He does come out into a metagame that is already pretty prolific with decks that are doing what he wants you to do. By that I mean Merlin and Werewolf show up a lot. Merlin, I think, perhaps the other card in Snap that is arguably as powerful as this card. And I do think that it's important to center the conversation on how strong this card actually is. I've been asking some of my friends at a high level to rank the following Season Pass cards as they were on release: Mr. Fantastic First Steps, Iron Patriot, Sam Wilson, Merlin, and this guy. Consistently, he has been either 4th or 5th on that list, which is to say he is right in the Merlin zone of this is clearly one of the best cards in the game, but it might not be strong enough to get nerfed. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But what that does mean is that this card is very clearly one of the strongest season passes they've made in a very long time. So let's talk about the decks that he goes in, and then a little bit about the general ethos of what a strong season pass means and what we might be able to expect. It might come as a surprise to some, but the deck that I have played the most with this card is a Frankie Ray, Maverick, and shockingly enough, Scarlet Spider list. This list comes from Big Baby, and largely the experiment here is to play as many things as possible that sort of reflect Shou-Lao's buff or give it to something else. Having it go onto a Maverick gives you effectively double the buff. Having it go onto a Scarlet Spider gives you effectively double the buff. You kind of see what's going on here. The idea here is to invest as fully as we can in Shou-Lao. I was very, very happy with the Maverick stuff and the Scarlet Spider stuff. That stuff was good. I was a little less happy with the Frankie Ray stuff, not on her own merits, but because it was often quite hard to also get a 6 to come down alongside Shou-Lao. And so it ended up being a little bit contradictory. Because if you want to play Shou-Lao on turn 6 on your Scarlet Spider, well, then your turn 5 is Scarlet Spider and a 1-drop, and you're not playing Mockingbird, and you're not playing, of course, a Sasquatch off of that. And so you end up with a deck that is doing some powerful things, but those powerful things can get in the way of the other powerful things. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a sort of more evolved version of this that ended up just playing those power spikes instead of going for the Frankie Ray 6s stuff as well. That might have been a bit beyond the pale, but what I will tell you is Maverick in these lists is legit. Scarlet Spider in these lists is also legit. These are extremely legitimate and real things to be doing with a Shou-Lao. I was weirdly a little bit disappointed with the zombies build of Shou-Lao, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just fine. Like, this is a deck that is not really multiplying Shou-Lao in any ways other than Absorbing Man. But if you're going to be doing Absorbing Man to multiply your Shou-Lao, it means you're going to take your turn 5 and play Shou-Lao on your turn 5, which costs you a proc on your Shou-Lao. So, bleh. Lockheed is in here because I wanted to try him out. Probably would be better if it was a Surge. It's just stuff. The card that actually impressed me the most here was Red Guardian. And I think that's a lot because of other people in the Shou-Lao space, right? Like, if people are playing Maverick stuff, Red Guardian and Deafening Chord are really good. If they're just like putting things out there that you need to get rid of, it's really good to like hit a Merlin, for example, with that kind of stuff. You get a lot out of it, but I think that that's the part of the deck that I liked. And then the rest of it was just like, I feel like the zombie point package is just secondary to Shou-Lao. Maybe I'd rather just be fully a Shou-Lao deck. Get the Spider in here, get the Maverick in here, that package instead, maybe do some Wolf things. Not impressed with the zombies. I was much more impressed with Wolf, with Maverick, with Spider. I could very easily see like taking this deck, taking all those cards out, putting those cards in, and this deck being a little bit better. I thought it would be like, this was kind of like I think this is going to be like a pretty slam dunk place to play this. It's fine. Like, it's not bad, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being significantly worse than I thought it would relative to other Shou-Lao decks. Probably the most predictable possible version of the Shou-Lao deck is just slapping him into the already good Wolf Shell. What I'm a little surprised by is that we kept Annihilus in here. I don't think it's like that surprising when you zoom out enough, but it is something that I kind of expected it to be a replacement for, but it turns out it's just nice to have Sentry. This deck has a lot less of the multipliers of force that Shou-Lao is able to bring to bear, but it also has Shadow King, and just by virtue of having Shadow King, it has a really good day one matchup into other Shou-Lao stuff that are relying on Maverick being on the board or Scarlet Spider having a bunch of points. Shadow King just says, actually, no, it doesn't. And I think that that's the biggest competitive advantage this version of the deck has, where it's just like a bunch of stuff that's like vaguely disruptive. Oh, you know, you're going to play Kitty Pryde and Shou-Lao it. I have Electra. I have Shadow King. Oh, you're going to do Maverick stuff. I've got Shadow King. I've got my own Shou-Lao. I'm going to try to make that actually happen for me. Maybe I'll steal something important off the cable. Maybe I'll quake you into a bad location. Maybe I'll deafening chord something that matters to you. A bunch of like minor interactive pieces that add up into a surprising amount of ability to stop your opponents who are doing more maximal Shou-Lao stuff. I was a little bit surprised to see this being as good as it was, but I do think it is quite good. The Electra, of course, comes from LOL. This is me and him are like on Electra Island. Like, that's just what we're doing. I think this is a very solid list and a very reasonable contender. If you just want like a safe, good list for this card that isn't doing anything too experimental, and you're willing to say like, look, maybe someone else comes up with a better thing to do, I'm gonna play the safe, good version. This is what that is. From Safety Blade, Double Dragon brings Dragoon of the Mon alongside Shou-Lao, and that allows this deck to be a bit of an anomaly in the sense that, like, I was really low on Dragon of the Moon. I thought it was going to be a pretty abysmal, like, just sort of generally useless card. But when you look at, like, what's actually going to be hit in your deck, none of it is stuff you care about. When you look at what it can hit in your opponent's deck, it's going to be pretty okay. This is a reasonable 3-drop to play on 3. There's enough ones in here that you're able to mix it in on 4 as well, and you don't feel too terrible about it if you want to play your Wolf first. It's honestly not that bad. What this deck does that I think is really interesting, though, is that when you're playing a Shou-Lao deck, a lot of what you're doing is Merlin, is Kitty Pryde, is Kate Bishop. That stuff fills your hand up. And so Master Mold and Ronin actually kind of decent here. Like, that's the biggest thing this deck is speaking to, is like, there's a lot of fill your hand up crap going on right now, and disrupting people along that axis is actually meaningfully disrupting them. You are blocking their draws. You are blocking the things that are going to come back into their hand from Merlin, from Kitty Pryde, from Kate Bishop. All these things are not happening for them, and they play those cards because they want to play them. It kind of does matter. I'm not saying Dragoon of the Mon is the perfect card for right now, but I thought it was like a 1 out of 5, and I think it's probably closer to like a 2. Like, this is a card that is pretty clearly, to me, in the second quintile of bad cards, right? Like, it is a card that exists from 20th to 40th percentile, as opposed to what I thought existing from 0th to 20th percentile. And I think that kind of stuff is like, you know, it's worth pointing out that a lot of these Merlin decks are really full of their hands. So being Master Mold Ronin, it's not as bad as it would be in approximately, and I'm going to say this, and I think it's actually true, literally every other metagame we've ever had. Shou-Lao, as a green power card, is a Phoenix Force card. And that means that it goes in the Jet Phoenix Force deck. I've played against this deck a couple times, and it is quite scary. Like, this deck, when it is able to properly start repeating these honor reveals, There's some really dangerous stuff that can happen. I'm not 100% sold on the exact build here because it did require getting rid of Scarlet Spider. And Scarlet Spider is, or not Scarlet Spider, sorry, Superior Spider-Man. Getting my Spider Boys confused. That's actually like kind of a real loss. And I know why it had to happen. I get it. But it is real. Like, you do feel it. You are like, oh man, I really wish I had access to that still because I really want to play a 5 on turn 4. And if you can do that, you can do a lot of stupid stuff. But like, this is a deck that is also skimping on ways to kill off your stuff. You've got Misery, who is great. You've got a fastball special, but you're losing out on like Carnage, Venom. You're really like skimping on some of the things that make this deck consistent in order to make the power spike heavier with Shou-Lao. I think that's a really reasonable thing to do, but I'm not sure this ends up being the best build of the deck. It's certainly a powerful thing to do, though. Like, I can't overstate. The amount of threat this deck has is so high. I just don't know if it's actually good at being a Shou-Lao deck. It's just really powerful baseline, and I'm not sure Shou-Lao is making it better. I think it's also important that we talk about the elephant in the room here, which is, this is a really good Season Pass card. It is in the conversation with 3 Season Pass cards who have been nerfed and 1 Season Pass card who hasn't. When you talk about this Season Pass card, it is in the conversation with original Iron Patriot, with original Sam Wilson, with original Mr. Fantastic First Steps, with current Merlin, and those are like the 5 strongest cards that have come out in the since I guess last January, right? Like, those are the 5 strongest Season Pass cards. I think that we have to talk about this. One of the things that I was really surprised by, we did the the Golden Cubes voting, and I don't consider this a spoiler because you could just go look at the comments on this. When I talked about what Season Pass of the year was going to be, I expected it to be a pretty close run thing between Merlin and Agamotto, because to me, Merlin is the 5-star card, very pushed, power creepy version of what Agamotto is, who is like the much safer, more consistent, but still very cool version of a Season Pass card. I expected, personally, if you asked me, I would have said Agamotto was a better Season Pass card, because it's not so dangerously pushed to the point that it would risk getting nerfed. And I don't think people realize just how close to the sun Merlin is flying right now. Like, he's flying very close to the sun. In fact, he's been flying very close to the sun for 6 months. That is probably the strongest card in the game. So when you ask me to rank these cards, original Iron Patriot, original Sam Wilson, original Mr. Fantastic First Steps, the current Merlin, and Shou-Lao, he does go at the bottom for me. But that's not to say that he's not at risk of getting nerfed. And I think that it's probably, like, the reason I bring up the Merlin and the Snappies, the Golden Cubes, is because I think that for the long-term health of the game, it would be way better if they made more Agamottos and less Merlins, right? The goal should be Agamottos, and sometimes when you miss high, you make a Merlin. I don't think everyone agrees with that, because the voting on whether Merlin or Agamotto or the other 2 contenders were Iron Patriot and Sam Wilson, which one was the best Season Pass? Season Pass of the year. Merlin beat Agamotto 235-8. It wasn't close. And that's a bit of a black pill for me. Like, I think, to me, what that represents is that as much as people say they don't want it, as much as people decry power creep and pay to win, what they want on the Season Pass is a broken-ass card. They want as much power as they can get without it getting nerfed. That's what they want. And that's what Merlin represents to me. I think that me and those 8 people who are voting for Agamotto, we're actually right about this. I think I'm right. But if I'm a company and I'm looking at a player base, and I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that if this preference is being expressed in YouTube comments, it's probably being expressed in purchases as well. And I'm a company and I'm looking at that. I'm thinking we got to aim higher on Season Passes. I also think it's worth pointing out in this context that cards like Shou-Lao are less off in terms of what they should be of a power level than cards like Weapon X. Cards like Weapon X are like, let's say you want your Season Pass to be an 8 out of 10. A Weapon X is like a 4 out of 10, a 3 out of 10 maybe, right? A Shou-Lao is like a 9 out of 10. It's a lot closer to what you want that card to actually be. I don't really know another way around that. And it's not great to look at what I'm seeing reflected back to me and say, I think what people actually want is just really good shit in the season pass. Like, I think demonstrably that's what they want. And I think this card is really good. But fundamentally what I'm trying to say is, personally, I think it's better for the game and the player base if cards are a little weaker than this, but not a lot weaker than this. But they should be aiming for maybe a little bit under this spot, right? When they make a new card and they ask you to spend money for that new card, whether that be on the season pass or in the token shop, it should be something that is good, fulfilling, and worth playing. I think that's just a true statement. When you have a card like a Weapon X or an Esme Kaku or any number of the season pass cards that were just like, what the hell is this? It's so bad. I think that's way worse than when they have a card that misses high. But by the same token, the card that won worst nerf of the year, and this one was a lot closer, but it was Mr. Fantastic First Steps. And I think that that speaks to a gap in severity of nerfing, which is to say, Iron Patriot got nerfed, it still does what it does. Sam Wilson got nerfed, it still does what it does. Mr. Fantastic First Steps got nerfed, he got obliterated past the point of all return. I think that in the context of this stuff, I am relatively optimistic for Shou-Lao. Because Shou-Lao is so big and has so many stats that I think there is a very reasonable nerf they could make to this card that would still make it a good card. Much closer to the Iron Patriot style of nerf, where I look at this card and I'm like, all right, what's the actual problem here? If this card is nerfable, it's probably like you make it a 5/6, right? I don't think they need to be drastic with it. And I think that there's this dual desire in the player base for cards to be powerful, but not so powerful that they have to get nerfed. And I think that, bluntly, it might be time for us to accept that if they're going to make powerful cards, sometimes they're going to be too strong. Where I prefer Shou-Lao to the other cards is that they have way more numbers on this card to mess around with. When you make a 2-drop, changing anything about that 2-drop is deeply meaningful to it because the increments by which those numbers are available to other cards in its space are much, much smaller. You have a 5-drop, you've got a lot more room to play around, which is a long way of saying I'm not sure Shou-Lao needs to get nerfed. I think it's a very strong card, but if Merlin didn't need to get nerfed, and arguable, I think he probably did, but we exist in a world where a card that I would consider at least comparably strong to this card was not nerfed for 6 months. So, who knows? I think that this is a card that is nerfable in a way that is not Mr. Fantasticing it. And unfortunately, I think that this is something that I have to talk about in the release video for the card. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.